Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Perspective is everything. You might even say it's the key to life itself. A good friend of mine repeatedly kind of drilled this into me, this idea that perspective is everything. And it's so important that it shapes how we experience life and how effectively or enjoyably we live it and how fulfilled we get, whether we find fulfillment or whether we just find despair. But what the heck is perspective anyway? I was also taught that, you know what, don't just use a word. Find out what it really means instead of what you think it means. So there's two definitions I pulled offline, from my iPhone, from the Oxford Dictionary. The first one is a particular attitude toward or way of regarding something, comma, a point of view. And the other one is true understanding of the relative importance of things, a sense of proportion. And both of these are really good working definitions of perspective when we're talking about our perspective on the world. And, we can choose different perspectives when we look at the world. Life itself is both wonderful and terrible. Which part of it are you going to focus on? And I remember sitting with this very friend, and we were in a coffee shop or a restaurant or something. We're talking about this idea that, life can be and is horrible. The earth is a horrible place. The earth itself is actively trying to kill us at all times. There's not a purpose for us to be here. And so there are various things, natural disasters and viruses and bacteria and, predators and all these kind of things, and overpopulation, and even other people are actively trying to kill us or make our lives at least miserable. And you can look in the world and you can see all the horror, all the meaninglessness, all of the despair. You can see the wars and the way that people treat each other and the famine and, the basic things. You look at just how life is and how unfair it can be and how awful it can be. And you can be filled with despair and meaningless, this feeling of meaninglessness. And he goes, at some point, you're just going to jump off a bridge, Or you can look at it a different way. And I don't mean by being a Pollyanna and ignoring these other things and pretending that they don't exist. But where are you going to focus most of your attention? Because life is also beautiful. You can indulge your curiosity to no end and explore reality. Life is full of stuff, things to experience, to learn, to explore, to express yourself, to just have the joy of being consciousness experiencing itself. There is, love and fulfillment and, the list goes on and on. The world is a wonderful place. I just talked to my granddaughters today and had one of them sing to me her ABCs and then a song from The Sound of Music. It was great. Life is wonderful, but there's also many terrible things that happen in life as well. I had a death of a partner. Which are you going to focus on? Where is your perspective going to be in terms of how are you going to look at life? And our perspective affects and it changes our perception of reality. It doesn't change reality itself. It just changes, how we look at things and what we actually notice. I think there's a quote that says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. They don't actually really change. You just notice them. And if we're receptive and open-minded, we start to see information and messages that were there all the time. And all of a sudden, well, here it is, staring us in the face with, oh, really? I just never really noticed that. Your mind will readily accept or reject information based upon your perspective, your beliefs, your goals, your worldview, all that kind of thing. If you are open-minded and looking for something, you're going to see things in a particular way, and you're going to see the reasons. For example, if you have something that you want to do, and your perspective is that you're really worthless, you're going to fail, well, you're going to find all the reasons why you cannot do something, all the obstacles. If you have a different perspective and start to believe in yourself and have a little bit of confidence and say, you know what, I'm a person, this other person that succeeded as a person or did the thing, learned to play the bass guitar like a virtuoso. There are a couple of people, man. This one girl, I should call her a woman. She's very young. The channel is called Julia Plays Groove. Oh my God, very young woman in Poland, and she's just killing it on the bass. And I'm like, oh man, do I sell my stuff or do I practice more? But I look and say, you know what, Julia's a person, I'm a person, and despite my advanced age, I can practice more and have the more directed practice. And all of a sudden, if I have that kind of attitude, if my perspective changes, well then, my perception of the world starts to change, and I start to see the things that can help me get there. You know what I mean? That's and the world itself has not changed at all. It's just we've changed our perspective. Now, if our perspective is proper, so to speak, and I think it really, it does just about, it is actually proper at this point, and we have a sense of the relative importance of things in our lives, in the world, we can approach life in a way that helps us, be fulfilled and be happy. Most things in life we cannot change. The people that wrote the Serenity Prayer, they were geniuses. Most of the stuff in life, in the world, I cannot change. I can't have any effect on it. Most things really just aren't all that important. Most people in my life really aren't all that important. There's the people that are core to me that their opinions are important. The fact that we have good relationships are important. Most people aren't. Most things that happen aren't really that important. I love all these instruments, but they're not anywhere near as important as some of the other stuff in my life. Maybe that one is super important. But a lot of stuff isn't important in life. But we, with the wrong perspective, can blow things up and concentrate on all those. And I remember vividly, I probably had, I was probably like 18 months or 2 years, probably a good 2 years, maybe 2.5 years into recovery. I'm in the car with my sponsor, and we're driving to a meeting. And he says, "You remember the first year of recovery?" "Yep, sure do." He goes, "You remember how every day was a crisis?" Like, absolutely. I remember that vividly. He said, "Name them." Couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. There were two things that happened. I had a tooth that got really infected. I had that pulled. It was very, very painful. And, and the other thing was my father passed away. I mean, those were monumental events, and my dad passing away was a big event, but every day was a crisis. But I couldn't remember all those other crises to save my life. The things that we think are so important in the moment, look at your own life, whether you're in recovery or not, and can you remember those things that were so important? But some things are really, really important. The things that we can change, well, there's not as many of them, but the things we can change are the things that we truly value, or the people that we truly value, the core beliefs we have, the values that we have. Those are the things we should focus on. And there's not as many of them as the things that we cannot change. If our perspective is off, then we never get to this point. We never get to the point where we can say, what, I want to improve this relationship. I want to, improve my ability to play the bass guitar. That's more important than, some other thing like, doing overtime at work. Whatever it happens to be, the things that are our core values, if I decide, what, I want to quit this 9-to-5 job and I want to do something else that's going to provide me with a living that I actually like. If I focus on that, my perspective changes. Then these things become possible. But if our perspective is always off, and we're so focused on the things we can't change, and oh man, inflation is like this, which I talked about, or I'm 57, there's not as much time left, all that kind of stuff, or look at the state of the world, and my God, the tariffs. If we just focus on these things that we can't change, we stay stuck, and our perspective on life colors our perceptions, and we see the world in a completely different way. We focus on these other things. All these things are true. All these things are there, but only certain things we can actually affect, and only certain things are actually locally important to us. And, how do you want to spend your life? Do you want to spend your life bogged down in despair and misery and despondent? Or do you want to live and enjoy this one life that you have? So perspective is incredibly important. And believe me, I understand it. It's easy for me to say this to you now. It's easy to make a YouTube video about this or to talk to a friend about this. But, various times when I'm in the thick of things, my perspective gets way off. And one of the greatest assets that I have, and hopefully one of the greatest assets that you have, are other people to kind of knock your perspective back and say, hey, you know what? You're looking at this a little wrong. You're getting too in your head. My partner Susan is fantastic for that, and she can kind of push me back on course. Say, okay, you're way off a little bit. Your perspective is off. And I have other friends that will do the same for me. And sometimes I just watch YouTube videos or listen to a podcast or read something where somebody pushes my perspective back. I say, okay, I've been a little off. So yeah, curating your perspective is monumental. It is a huge part of living life, I guess I want to say effectively, living life where you get the most out of it, and You don't get bogged down in despair. You don't turn around and say, hey, you know what, I just spent all this time just feeling helpless. Because we're not helpless. We can affect great change, at least for ourselves. Once we change our perspective, our perception opens up and we see all these things that were there all the time. And we notice them like it's the first time. Have a good one, kids.